enlisted in the United States Army as a private first class. Throughout his 20-year of service, Sergeant First Class Bullard served in numerous positions, from an infantry team leader, a squad leader, a platoon sergeant, an ROTC instructor, and staff in COIC. As a 20-year veteran, Sergeant First Class retired Bullard was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, West Berlin, Germany, Vicenza, Italy, Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, Hampton University, Virginia, and Seoul, Korea. Sergeant First Class retired Bullard deployed several times to include Operation Urgent Fury on the island of Grenada and Joint Federal Task Force to the island of St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, during the aftermath of Hurricane Hugo. Sergeant First Class retired Bullard's military education includes graduation from the United States Army Operations and Intelligence course, the Infantry Advanced Basic and Primary Non-Commissioned Officer courses, and the United States Army Jumpmaster course. Sergeant First Class retired Bullard is married to Petty Officer First Class Surface Warfare United States Navy retired Marlene Bullard. They have 2 children, Sheena and Luke. And at this time, I present to you Sergeant First Class retired Denison Bullard.
Lieutenant General Farrell, Major General Williams, Brigadier General Hamilton, Brigadier General Brunson, distinguished visitors and guests, alumni, cadre, family and friends, and most especially the outstanding cadets of the Hampton University Pirate Battalion, good evening.
Good evening.
Hooah.
Hooah.
My name is Sergeant First Class Dennis Bullard, and a little over 26 years ago, I was given the distinct honor and privilege of serving as a senior military instructor and operations sergeant of this great battalion. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined being honored with an incredible opportunity as this to return to our home by the sea to address you tonight. This year is the 100th anniversary of what has become the premier training program for the future officer leadership in the world, namely the United States Army Reserve Officer Training Corps. Hampton University has enjoyed a long and distinguished part of that history, actually starting many years prior to the establishment of the Army ROTC program, when at the founding of Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute, Brigadier General Armstrong required that all men take part in military drill. There is a proud history associated with the Pirate Battalion, one that each and every member of this battalion, past and present, should take great pride in, instill in the cadets who will join its ranks in the future. My background in the United States Army was that of an airborne infantryman. I served in a variety of units, both in the continental United States and abroad. One highlight in my career was when I was a young sergeant in the U.S. Army's Berlin Brigade, where I had the privilege of leading wall patrols along the sector boundaries between the American sector of Berlin, which was known as West Berlin, along with the French and British sectors, and the Soviet sector of Berlin, which was known as East Berlin. For those of you who saw the recent movie Bridge of Spies, observing the Soviet East German checkpoints from the center of that bridge, which we knew as Freedom Bridge, was an incredible, important, and exciting part of our patrols. Arriving at Hampton University from headquarters 18th Airborne Corps at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I came with the confidence that I could use my somewhat diverse background to help teach, train, and mentor the future leaders of our Army. While I would like to think that I did a decent job over the 3-year period I served this battalion, I am very humbled with the knowledge that the life lessons I learned here were absolutely critical to making me the man I am today. So I hope you're able to perhaps envision this young hard-charging paratrooper with ideas and expectations about how I could make a difference, arriving on the yard. And for those that remember the days of Cadet Kirkland, He's the one who told me what that meant, because I go, what do you mean on the yard? Well, the answer was and continues to be one of the highlights of my personal and professional life. For like so many of you here tonight, I too am a member of the Pirate Battalion. What? Thank you. So it's with this perspective that I've prepared my remarks for tonight. A couple of years ago, after speaking with retired Lieutenant Colonel Claude Van III, I sat down and prepared my nuggets of wisdom for the Pirate Battalion. These thoughts, which I will share with you now, are certainly very applicable to one's development and transition into being an officer and leader in our Army. To the cadets present tonight, I ask that you ponder these nuggets as you continue your academic and military science studies here at Hampton University. To the officers and non-commissioned officers present this evening, I respectfully ask that you also evaluate these thoughts from the Pirate Battalion's former sergeant, and perhaps consider them as you train, mentor, and lead those cadets, soldiers, and officers who have been placed in your charge. So my nuggets of wisdom are as follows. Number one, always remember that you are no longer on the yard. You are a leader of soldiers from many diverse backgrounds. As leaders and mentors, you assume the added responsibility of being a role model to not only your soldiers, but to all of those people around you. Take pride in who you are, where you come from, and where you're going. Believe me when I say that there are times when a young junior officer is identified as being one who will go places and achieve perhaps the highest of ranks. We have one such person here with us this evening. I'm gonna put him on the spot. He was one of mine. Years ago, I remember then Cadet Xavier Brunson. Cadet Brunson likely had no idea of what we as a cadre saw so far as his potential was. What we recognized was that this man possessed an unlimited potential when he was a cadet. Now look at him, he's a general officer. One of the most gratifying and humbling experiences of my life, and it's been going on a few years in my life, came last November when I, along with Lieutenant Colonel Van and a number of the Pirate Battalion cadets of his era, had the honor and privilege of seeing this gentleman, warrior, and leader receive the stars of a Brigadier General. Please do not think for a minute that had General Brunson been anything other than a consummate professional, that day when he joined the ranks of the general officers of our Army would have never come. Who is certain? Number two, pay close attention to suggestions made by your first sergeant and your platoon sergeant, especially early on in your time in your new unit. These persons have many years of experience and know the ropes. And I can't emphasize this point enough. These non-commissioned officers have likely seen many a young officer come before you, and he or she has probably not only learned the job you are undertaking, there's also a distinct possibility that due to manning shortages or other reasons, that sergeant probably did your job at one time. You can also believe that a good commanding officer will ask his or her platoon sergeants and first sergeant for candid opinions regarding a young officer, especially one who is newly assigned. A commander will be especially interested in whether or not the officer is, at least in the sergeant's estimation, prepared to lead soldiers, most especially into battle. Number three, you have learned the textbook and the school solution basics of your craft in ROTC. You will continue to do so at Officer Basic Course. You will find that many times the practical application in your unit may well be different than what you have been taught or experienced. So I'm going to give you my answer to it. It's real simple. It's called Semper Gumby. Always always flexible. This advice is not only applicable to you as you are commissioned and assume your role as an officer leading soldiers, but for those of you who will graduate officer basic course and then move into a civilian career, this thought also holds true. I now work with attorneys, and one of the bits of advice I give to law school students and freshly minted attorneys is to remember that what was taught in law school is a good foundation for your practice, but it's critical to quickly learn the real-world realities of your new job. There are a number of resources that you can learn from, and some of them we are speaking about tonight. Number 4, never say something along the lines of, well, in advanced camp, or in my ROTC unit, or in officer basic course, we did this. There's an interesting movie from some years ago starring Clint Eastwood entitled Heartbreak Ridge. It is a very fictional story about a Marine platoon in Grenada. And I strongly encourage the MS4s and the junior officers to watch this movie to see the development of the young second lieutenant. While the movie is a work of fiction, somebody knew what they were doing when they wrote the script for the lieutenant's part. The lieutenant goes from making his priority of writing a tactics paper for the warfighting club and making sure that the platoon sergeant knows that he was the commander of his ROTC unit, and missing key field training so he could go to a doctor's appointment. He got to the point where the grizzled platoon sergeant turned the reins of his platoon over to him in the middle of a combat situation. The movie also gives some keen insight about long-term and long-time relationships between senior officers and non-commissioned officers. These relationships begin when you are a cadet and will follow you for the rest of your career and hopefully your lives. I encourage the cadre to consider obtaining a copy of Heartbreak Ridge and showing at least the relevant parts to the MS4s. Number 5, do not be afraid to seek advice from your non-commissioned officers. However, always remember that at the end of the day, you are the officer and are the person accountable for the actions and results of your unit. You can delegate authority, but you cannot, nor will you, delegate your accountability and responsibility. You and your non-commissioned officers are a team and should back each other up at all times. You may come across a situation that you've never encountered before and may or may not think that you know how to best deal with it. There is a good chance that your sergeant has encountered such a situation, but even if not, at times it doesn't hurt to gather some input before you make the ultimate decision. But again, never forget that the accountability and responsibility for that decision is yours and yours alone. Number 6, remember a very important rule. You may praise in public, which is a very good idea, but never reprimand in public. The majority of your soldiers will strive to work very hard and do an outstanding job for you. These are the soldiers who you want to recognize for the valuable contributions that they make for our Army. Of course, such recognition should always, as much as possible, occur in public. Not only does such recognition build on that soldier's motivation and morale, it also affects your other soldiers who will know that you are watching out for them and recognizing those who make things happen. Conversely, never reprimand in public. The time to reprimand is also a time to teach, and the student in such a situation is far more likely to receive and understand your guidance and admonishment if they are not being embarrassed in the presence of their fellow soldiers. Number 7, find a sharp, seasoned lieutenant in your battalion and seek his or her help as your mentor as you transition into the unit. Use that person to not only help you with administrative tasks as you arrive, but to also work with you from a professional development standpoint. Folks, this is a very important suggestion, in that the officer you use as your mentor has previously been where you are now. It would be especially helpful to find a good, fellow Hampton University alumnus, as you would create the needed bond earlier than perhaps otherwise would happen. You will learn as you progress in your career that having a senior mentor can be a tremendous help in the years to come. Oh, and guess what? The same advice holds true in reverse. When you become that established officer of your unit, go find a young fledgling officer and take that person under your wing. Number 8, spend extra hours learning all about the jobs and tasks of your subordinates. If your troops are cleaning weapons, do it with them so that they know that the lieutenant can do it, especially if you have crew serve weapons. Same is true with getting your hands dirty at the motor pool. If you know the task, you can properly lead and inspect it. I had a habit when I was an anti-tank platoon sergeant in a variety of units. Over the years, a few of my former platoon leaders came back and told me that while my methods were perhaps a bit unorthodox, when they grasped the meaning of what I was doing, a light bulb kicked on, and they told me they were better officers and leaders of men because of it. Well, how did we arrive at this point? It took a lot of work, and a lot of it took place after hours. When a lieutenant was assigned to the platoon, among other things, I made sure that officer knew how to assemble and disassemble every type of weapon assigned to our platoon. They learned everything I could teach them in regards to the TOW anti-tank weapon system, not only technically, but also tactically. The lieutenant became very proficient at inspecting a gun jeep, including getting under the vehicle and truly giving it a going over. The majority of this training took place after hours, and oftentimes it was conducted in such a way that the soldiers could see the lieutenant's hard work. Over the years, I had 5 different company commanders support this concept, and as a result of such training and professional development, they knew they could depend on our platoon to be the best tank murderers in the battalion. I also had similar training requirements for my subordinate non-commissioned officers. And when I was serving on jump status, I pushed very hard for my lieutenant and each of the section leaders, who were usually staff sergeants or sergeants, who were not jump master qualified, to attend the jump master course when it was offered, so that instead of needing someone else to do it for them, they could inspect their own soldiers' parachute rigging before they boarded the aircraft. And as jump masters, they could lead an aircraft full of combat-loaded paratroopers as they exited over the drop zone wherever in the world that took us. So what was the lesson here? Well, the lieutenant was tactically prepared to destroy enemy armor and certainly understood what his men were required to do with their weapons, equipment, and so forth. In return, the men knew the lieutenant was also proficient in these tasks. It bred a sense of loyalty and a desire in the troops to follow and respect their lieutenant. They knew and trusted the young officer. And think about how the results of such a training program and mindset would transfer to the battlefield. Number 9, your conduct and appearance off-duty should reflect the highest of standards. It is important that the troops see you as a leader at all times. This bit of advice should go without saying, but sadly I have seen a number of officers and non-commissioned officers act in such a way in public as to discredit themselves, their unit, and our Army. You never know when you will see a soldier somewhere in public, whether it be downtown, at the airport, or somewhere else. Be identifiable as a leader, an example setter, no matter where you are. Enough said on that point. Finally, at some point, you will be invited by your NCOs to join them for dinner, at the club, or somewhere along that line. Make it a priority to accept that invitation, as that shows that you have been accepted. Do not, however, get drunk or do anything like that. Show that you are a good example to look up to. This piece of advice may sound trivial, but there's a reason I saved it for last. The time comes in each assignment where a successful officer achieves a high level of respect from his or her non-commissioned officers that is so critical to the success of our Army. As you progress in rank, You will likely build a reputation that very well may precede you to your new assignment, especially if you are in a specialized field that is somewhat small, such as the airborne, where you will likely cross paths with your fellow officers and non-commissioned officers throughout your Army career. I clearly remember the NCO Club at North Fort Lewis, Washington. Back in 1975, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and Hannibal was writing his operations order to cross the Alps to defeat the Romans, we had a tradition in the Army wherein if we were in garrison for the end of month pay date, we wore our Class A uniforms, conducted inspections, took care of administrative payday tasks, and at the end of the day, we adjourned to the NCO Club for a libation or two. There were only a few officers present in the club. Those officers were there because they were invited to be there by their sergeants. It was a time to celebrate successes, tell some war stories, and build further bonds. Prior to things perhaps going too far in regards to consuming alcohol, the officers would politely excuse themselves and adjourn for the evening. The bond grew even stronger between those very professional officers and non-commissioned officers. So trust me when I say that if the officer was not respected by the non-commissioned officers, such an invitation would not have been extended. So when yours comes, make it a priority to take advantage of it. Following my assignment at Hampton University in October 1992, I moved to my final assignment as a senior operations sergeant with the combined staff in the U.S. Republic of Korea Combined Forces Command in Seoul, Korea. While serving in Korea, I had the privilege of spending time with some of our officers who were commissioned during my time at Hampton University. Let me say that perhaps some of my proudest times were when I was able to fly to various sites in Korea with a CJ-3, who at the time was now retired Major General Stephen Silvasi, who some of you who were around my days remember General Silvasi coming to meet the Pirate Battalion. Why was I so proud? Because I specifically asked to have a certain young lieutenant fly those missions as pilot in command. As I made those requests for that officer to fly us around Korea, I reminded myself of when he was a young MS-3 learning the basics of land navigation. I must have been out of my mind. I was entrusting the lives of my general and myself to this officer, hoping that he could read an aviation sectional. Not to worry. The pilot was one of our former cadets and recently retired Lieutenant Colonel Marv Chisholm. This is one of many examples of where paths may cross, no matter where in the world you may go. I would like to finish my remarks this evening by thanking each and every one of you who have joined us tonight. There is an unsung hero present tonight who has spent countless time and personal dollars in supporting this battalion and keeping the lines of communication flowing between the university's administration, the alumni, and the present cadre and cadets of this great battalion. He has given so much of himself to make such a difference and is a driving force between many actions and programs involving the Pirate Battalion. Lieutenant Colonel retired Claude Van III is from the class of 1977 and is a graduate of this program. Sir, would you please stand up? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a rousing round of applause in appreciation for the man. Hoorah! To those of you who are here tonight who were also cadre and cadets during my tenure, I thank you for all that you taught me and for how warmly you accepted me into your lives. I will always remember our summer and winter mini camps, and then seeing our pirates as MS-3s at the first ROTC region summer camps at Fort Bragg in 1990 and 1992, and at the 1991 Consolidated National Camp, Fort Lewis, Washington. But most of all, I will never forget the immense sense of pride that we as a cadre felt as our cadets were commissioned into our Army. And I know for a fact that the same pride will be felt by today's cadre when the present military science classes of Hampton University are commissioned and assume their positions of leadership in our Army and in this great nation of ours. May God bless each and every one of you. May He bless the United States of America, our beloved Army, Hampton University, and its Pirate Battalion. Airborne, all the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Bullard, for those sage words of advice. Sergeant Bullard came by my office yesterday. He wanted to, excuse me. He wanted to check me out, see what I was about. But he saw my jump master wings, and we already we were good. So we told some old jump stories about Fort Bragg, assisted drop zone, and I think we had it up. We connected. So thank you. But Sergeant Bullard, thank you for being the backbone as I grew up in the Army, the NCOs, your right arm, to keep your officers straight and give you great advice. Thank you for coming here and giving that advice. Also, Sergeant Bullard brought a $2,000 check from a charitable trust yesterday. So thank you for that. For the cadet fund, really nice, so thank you for that. And on behalf of the cadets, we have a small token of appreciation for coming out to support your battalion. At this time, I'll introduce Colonel